The notification came in at 6:47 inches the morning, while I was still in bed. Not an alarm. I don't use alarms. It was a wire confirmation, $2.3 million, cleared overnight from a Singapore account into our operating fund. I read it twice, set my phone face down on the nightstand, and went back to sleep for exactly 11 minutes. That is a habit I built years ago. Never let the first number you see in the morning become the loudest thing in your head. By the time I was in the shower, I had already decided what I was going to wear to my parents' Christmas dinner that night. The same thing I always wore when I went home. Dark jeans, a plain gray pullover, old boots that needed resoling. Not because I couldn't afford anything else. Because I had learned, over many years and many dinners, that showing up as myself made the evening significantly worse. I drove myself 4 hours south from Columbus, down through the flat middle of Ohio where the highway gets quiet and the sky gets wide and you have a lot of time to think about things you'd rather not think about. I thought about them anyway. I thought about my sister and the way she laughed at things that weren't funny. I thought about my brother-in-law and the particular way he had of asking me questions that weren't really questions. I thought about my mother and the silence she used like a tool. And I thought about my father, who had not said a kind word to me in 4 years, and who would, tonight, find a way to remind me of that without using any words at all. I pulled into the driveway at 5:12, right on time. My mother opened the door before I reached the porch. She looked at my boots. "You drove yourself," she said. "I always drive myself. Your sister took an Uber from the airport. She had things to carry." I said that was nice and went inside. The house smelled like it always did at Christmas. Cinnamon and something overcooked and the particular staleness of a home where the windows never opened. My nephew was on the floor in the living room with a tablet, headphones on, completely sealed off from the world. I envied him. My sister was in the kitchen arranging things on a serving tray with the focused intensity of someone performing surgery. Her husband was talking to my father near the fireplace. When I walked in, both of them paused their conversation in exactly the same way, not to greet me, but to register my presence, and then return to what they'd been doing. "Elise," my father said, not warmly, just acknowledging that I had arrived and that this fact was now part of the evening. "Hey, Dad." My brother-in-law did the thing he always did. He tilted his head slightly, smiled with half his mouth, and said, "Still doing the tech thing?" The tech thing. I had founded a supply chain software company when I was 26. We had 41 employees, clients in 11 countries, and were 18 months away from a Series B round that I was not supposed to discuss in public. The tech thing. "Still doing it?" I said. Good. Stable income?" My mother came in from the kitchen carrying a bowl and did not look at me when she passed. I sat in the chair closest to the door. Old habit. Dinner was what dinner always was. My sister talked about her renovation. Her husband talked about a promotion he was being considered for. My father nodded approvingly at both of them, the way he nodded at things that confirmed what he already believed about the world. My mother refilled glasses and made small sounds of encouragement at regular intervals. I ate and said very little and watched the candles in the center of the table burn down by exactly 1 centimeter. It was my sister who started it. She did it the way she always started things, not directly, but sideways, like she was commenting on something else entirely. "Mom was saying you're still in that same apartment," she said. "I am. Downtown Columbus, right? That must be expensive." "It's fine. I just mean, for someone who's..." She glanced at her husband and then back at me, still getting things off the ground. My father set his fork down. That was always the signal. When my father set his fork down, something had been decided. "We're not going to do this again," he said. I looked at him. "Do what?" "Pretend." He said the word like he'd been saving it. "You've been pretending for years, Elise, that you have a plan, that this company of yours is something real. You're 31 years old and you're still..." "I'm doing fine, Dad." "You're not. And I've been patient about it. But I'm your father, and I'm telling you," he picked up his fork again, which meant the decision had been delivered. "You need to make some actual choices. About your life. About what you're going to do." My mother touched my arm. "We worry," she said. "I know. We don't want you ending up with nothing." I thought about the wire confirmation I'd read that morning. I thought about the 11 minutes of extra sleep. I thought about the 41 people who reported to my company, and the signed LOI sitting in my inbox from a logistics firm in Rotterdam that wanted to license our software for their entire European operation. I understand, I said. My sister was looking at her plate, but she was smiling. Not meanly, exactly. Just satisfied. The way people are when something confirms what they've always believed. After dinner, I helped carry plates to the kitchen because I always did. My nephew had fallen asleep on the couch. The men had moved to the living room. My mother and my sister stood at the sink, and I stood beside the counter, and for a few minutes nobody said anything. And it was almost peaceful. Then my sister said, "There's actually something we wanted to talk to you about." I turned around. "Something we need a little help with," my mother said. Her voice had changed slightly. Something careful in it. My brother-in-law appeared in the kitchen doorway. Behind him, my father. I don't know why that specific arrangement, the two of them in the doorway, my mother and sister between us and the exit, made something go cold in my chest. But it did. "What kind of help?" I said. My brother-in-law stepped into the kitchen. He was holding an envelope. He set it on the counter between us. "It's just paperwork," he said. A formality, really. He was starting a business. That part was true. "A restaurant supply company," he explained. "Very good market timing. He'd done the research. He needed a small business loan. The loan required a co-signer with a stable credit history. His own credit had some complications from a few years back. Nothing serious, but it made the paperwork difficult. My sister's income was commission-based, and lenders were funny about that. "My credit history is straightforward," I said. "Not a question." "Right," he smiled. "We just need a signature. You'd be a co-signer, that's it. You wouldn't owe anything, it's just, how much?" A pause. $380,000, my mother said. "It's an SBA loan, very low interest." I looked at my father. He was looking at the wall behind me. "It's a good opportunity for your brother-in-law," he said. "And it's a chance for you to contribute something to this family." I picked up the envelope. I didn't open it. I held it in my hand and felt its weight and thought about what it meant that they had prepared this in advance, that they had the envelope ready, that they had done this at Christmas dinner after a conversation in which they had carefully reminded me that I was nothing. "I need to read through it," I said. "Of course," my brother-in-law said. "Take your time." I took the envelope to the small bathroom down the hall. I sat on the edge of the tub, opened the envelope, and read every page. It took 17 minutes. And then I sat there for another few minutes just thinking. The loan application listed me as the primary borrower, not cosigner. Primary borrower. My name, my social security number, my signature line first, on every page. My brother-in-law was listed as a secondary party. The business listed was registered at an address I didn't recognize. The date on the application was 6 weeks ago. 6 weeks ago, I had not been asked about this. I folded the papers carefully, put them back in the envelope, and went back to the kitchen. "There's a problem," I said. My brother-in-law looked up. "What kind of problem?" "The application lists me as the primary borrower. That's how the form works. It means that if this loan defaults, I'm the one who owes $380,000. I set the envelope on the counter. And I'm also not a co-signer on a business I've never been involved in. I'm listed as the owner." Silence. "Elise," my mother's voice. "It's complicated, the way these forms." "It's not complicated," I said. "I've signed SBA applications before. For my own company. I know exactly what this form says." My father turned from the wall. "You're making this into something it isn't." "Am I?" "Your brother-in-law has put a lot of work into this. Your sister has put in a lot of work. We thought," he paused, "we thought you would want to support your family." There it was. The whole thing, stripped down to its frame. You would want to support your family. As if this were a favor I was withholding rather than fraud I was declining to participate in. I picked up my jacket from the chair where I'd left it. "I'm going to go," I said. "Elise, I'm going to go. Merry Christmas." I drove 4 hours back to Columbus in the dark with the radio off. By the time I reached the city, I had made exactly one decision, and it was not the decision they expected me to make. I didn't call a lawyer. Not yet. I called my CFO. She picked up on the second ring. I told her what I needed. She asked me 3 questions. I answered them, and she said she'd have information for me by morning. I want to explain something, because I think people assume revenge is always about anger. It isn't, not the real kind. What I felt that night driving home wasn't rage. It was something quieter and colder than that. It was clarity. I had been sitting at that table for years, being told I was nothing, being managed and minimized and arranged into the shape of someone who needed to be helped, rather than someone who might one day help herself. And tonight they had shown me the full architecture of what they actually thought of me. Not a daughter, not a sister, a signature, a name on a form, a financial instrument to be used and set down. So I decided to be precise about it. My CFO called me at 7:14 the next morning. The loan application, as it turned out, had already been submitted. Not to the SBA process was still pending, but to a private credit intermediary that had pre-approved the amount pending the final signature page. The signature page they had tried to get me to sign the night before. Here is the part that matters. The intermediary had a parent company. The parent company had, 8 months earlier, been acquired by a holding group. I knew the holding group. I knew it because I had done business with one of its subsidiaries, and because in the process of that business I had been introduced to the managing director, and because I had stayed in contact with that managing director in the intermittent, low-frequency way that useful professional relationships work. I made a phone call. It took 4 days and 2 conference calls and 1 in-person meeting in a very quiet office in Columbus where I signed documents that I had read 3 times each. At the end of those 4 days, I owned the debt. Not technically the debt itself, the loan hadn't been finalized. What I owned was the right of first claim on the finalized loan, assigned through the holding group's subsidiary at a negotiated rate that reflected the risk profile of an unsigned SBA application attached to a shell business registered 6 weeks ago. My lawyer called it elegant. I called it Tuesday. The loan finalized 10 days later. My brother-in-law, apparently satisfied that I would eventually come around, had found a workaround for the signature page, a fact that would have alarmed me if it hadn't already been irrelevant. I waited. I waited because timing is everything, and because I had learned, over years of building something real out of nothing, that patience is not the same as passivity. I waited through January. I let the first payment due date pass. I let the notice of delinquency process through the system the way it was designed to. I let the machinery do its work. And then, on a Saturday morning in February, I drove south again. I wore the same gray pullover, the same boots. I drove myself. My mother answered the door. She looked startled, then quickly rearranged her face into something neutral. "Elise, I didn't know you were coming." "I know. Is everyone here?" "Your sister is yes. They're here." Can I come in?" She stepped back. I stepped inside. My father was at the kitchen table with a cup of coffee and the newspaper, the way he was every Saturday morning for as long as I could remember. My sister was on her laptop on the couch. My brother-in-law was somewhere I heard him moving in the hallway. I sat down at the kitchen table across from my father. My mother stood in the doorway between the kitchen and the living room. My sister came to the entrance of the kitchen but stopped. My brother-in-law appeared last. He was still holding his phone. He looked at me the way people look at something they're not sure is a threat yet. "What is this?" my sister said. "I want to talk to you about the loan," I said. My brother-in-law put his phone in his pocket. "The loan is handled," he said. "We worked it out without you." I know exactly how you worked it out." A pause. I put a folder on the table. Inside the folder were 4 documents. I had prepared 1 copy for each of them. I am nothing if not organized. "The loan is currently 17 days past its first payment due date," I said. "That's triggered the default escalation clause in the original loan agreement. Under that clause, the creditor has the right to demand immediate payment in full or to begin asset seizure proceedings." My father looked at the folder. He did not touch it. "What are you talking about?" "I'm talking about the fact that I'm your creditor," I said. "I purchased the loan 14 days ago through the holding group that owns the intermediary you used. The assignment was completed and recorded. I have the paperwork here. Nobody moved." "What?" my sister said. Not a question. Just the word, without anything attached to it. "You used my name on a fraudulent application," I said. "You forged my role. You submitted documents that misrepresented my involvement in a business I've never been part of. I know that. My lawyer knows that. The original lender knows that. As of 3 days ago. I kept my voice level. This was important. But I didn't come here to report you. I'm not here to threaten you with criminal charges. I'm here because I'm your creditor and this loan is in default and we need to discuss next steps. My brother-in-law sat down. He sat down the way people sit when their legs stop working properly. My sister put her hand on the kitchen door frame. My mother said my name very quietly. The business account associated with the loan has a current balance of $42,000, I continued. That amount will be applied to the outstanding principal. The remaining balance, along with the penalties accrued from the missed payment, will need to be addressed. I looked at my father. The loan is collateralized against this house. My father's coffee cup was still in his hand. He set it down, very carefully, like it was made of something that could break. You can't, my brother-in-law started. I can, I said. The assignment is legal, properly recorded, and documented. You're welcome to have your own attorney review it. I pushed the folder slightly toward the center of the table. I didn't come here to take anything. I want to be clear about that. I came here because you're my family, and I would rather work through this directly than through attorneys and courts. I paused. But I need you to understand what the situation is. All of it. My sister was crying. She had started somewhere in the last minute, and I hadn't noticed until now. She was standing in the doorway, and her shoulders were moving, and she wasn't making any sound. My father looked at me. For the first time in longer than I could remember, he looked at me like he was actually seeing me. Not the version of me he'd decided on years ago. Not the disappointment, the girl who never made the right choices, the one who needed managing. He looked at me the way you look at something when you realize it has been there the whole time and you simply failed to look. He didn't say anything. I waited. What do you want? My mother said. Her voice was very small. I want a repayment agreement, I said. Structured, written, legally documented. I want transparency about the business finances. And I want an acknowledgement in writing of what happened with the original application. I folded my hands on the table. That's it. No criminal referral, no public record beyond what already exists in the filing, just an agreement and an acknowledgement. My brother-in-law looked at his wife. My sister looked at the floor. My father looked at his hands. Elise! His voice was different, lower. I had not heard it that way before. I didn't know about the application, what they put on it. I looked at him. I believed him, partly. I believed that he had not known the specific details. I also believed that he had known enough and had not asked questions, because asking questions would have complicated something he wanted to be simple. That is a different kind of not knowing, and it carries its own weight. Okay, I said. I'm sorry, he said. 2 words. 11 years of dinners and silences and fork settings, and you're not doing anything real, and it's a chance for you to contribute something to this family. And then 2 words on a Saturday morning in February with a folder of documents on the kitchen table between us. I didn't cry. I had prepared for this meeting the way I prepared for every meeting. I had walked through the emotional variables and decided in advance where I would allow myself to feel them and where I would not. This was not one of the places. I know, I said. I stood up. My attorney will be in touch Monday morning about the repayment structure. I'd recommend you have someone you trust review it before you sign. I picked up my jacket from the back of the chair. The folder is yours to keep. My mother walked me to the door. She stood on the porch while I went down the front steps toward my car, and she called my name when I was halfway across the yard. I stopped and turned around. She was standing in the cold without a coat, her arms folded across her chest, looking at me like she was trying to memorize something. We didn't know, she said. I knew she didn't mean the loan. I know, I said again. I drove home with the radio on this time. Something quiet. I didn't listen to it. Back in Columbus, I parked in the garage below my building, took the elevator to the 23rd floor, and stood at the windows for a while looking at the city. It was February and everything was gray, and the river was a flat, dark ribbon 3 blocks to the west, and the office buildings were starting to light up the way they did on Saturday afternoons when the people who worked inside them decided they couldn't wait until Monday. I thought about my father's face when I'd said the house was collateral. I thought about my sister crying in the doorway without making any sound. I thought about my mother standing on the porch in the cold without a coat. And I thought about the girl who used to drive 4 hours south and eat quietly, and say very little and sit in the chair closest to the door because it was the one closest to the exit. That girl had built something real. She had built it without their belief, without their attention, without their interest in her success, or their awareness of what she was doing at 6:47 in the morning when a wire confirmation came through from Singapore. She had built it in the space that their indifference had left behind, which turned out to be a very large space. She had built it and she had not needed them to see it, but she had needed them to stop treating her like she was nothing. Now they knew. That was enough. I went to my desk and opened my laptop and wrote 2 emails and answered 3 messages that had come in while I was driving, and by 4 p.m. I was working on the Rotterdam contract because the Rotterdam contract was not going to close itself. And I had 41 people whose payroll ran on the 1st of every month, and that was the thing I was responsible for. The repayment agreement was signed 3 weeks later. My brother-in-law dissolved the shell company. The business account balance was applied to the loan principal. A structured payment schedule was established. My attorney handled every exchange. My father called me in March. Not about business, just to call. He asked about work and I told him a small amount of what was true and he listened without interrupting, which was something he had not done before, and at the end of the call he said he was proud of me. I said thank you. I meant it. Not because his pride was something I needed, but because the truth, told plainly and without performance, is always a thing worth saying, even late, even after, even when the person hearing it has already learned to live without it. The truth has a weight to it that nothing else does. And I had spent a very long time carrying mine alone. I was done with that now.